Hello and welcome back to Motorsport and Scale. This will be episode 3 of the Model Factory Hiro Porsche 917 build. In this episode I'm going to be working on finishing off the rear suspension step 6, or sorry, the rear frame step 6, which all I have left there is the fiberglass pieces for the transmission cooler and the spare tire carrier platform. So I have those 3 pieces here, so I'll just get those out of the bag and my little tray ready to prep and finish. Then we'll move on to the rear suspension, which is step 7. So we have that all sorted in here. We also have step 10, which is the front suspension. So a lot of commonality between the two with the brakes. So those two are worth knocking off, getting those parts prepped and painted and assembled at the same time. So that's the goal for this episode, is to complete those 3 steps. All right, so as I previously mentioned, I when I first get these kits, I go through them, I clean all the parts. I use magnetic tumbler to clean all the parts. I'm not, it kind of polishes them up, but that's not the actual reason that I do it. It's to get rid of all the junk that's on a mold, or mold release, all that kind of stuff. And then, you go through the parts and I inventory it, make sure I have everything. In the case of this kit, I was missing some parts, so I had to get in contact with Model Factory Hiro and get the parts that I was missing, which they did. They responded in a timely manner and then got the parts to me. No questions asked. It was just a couple minor parts, but nonetheless they were missing. But they made good on getting those to me. Yeah, and then I sort everything out by step. Sometimes like this I'll combine steps if it makes more logical sense. Like I have a lot of commonalities. Obviously all the brakes are the same, with very minor differences front to rear. Like these are the for the front brake cooling, the air duct comes into here, and this is the cooling vent that goes around the rotor. The rear doesn't have those on this car. Other cars they did. Le Mans, they didn't run rear brake coolers. Those are why we filled in those vents on the rear, those NACA ducts. That's what they would have been for, on the rear cowl. They would have been for rear brake ventilation. But for Le Mans, the rear brakes weren't really that taxed. It's a fairly high-speed circuit with not a lot of heavy braking zones. So they didn't think they needed to run rear cooling on the brakes. Anyways, yeah, so I got everything sorted out that I'm going to need for this step, including, I clip off the exact number of bolts or rivets or nuts or whatever it is, if there's requirements there, and I'll include them in this, and we'll prep everything as we go. So that's what I'm going to do. I was thinking I should sort this out into front rear, but I don't think it really matters at this point, because I just got to go through these parts, get them clean, clean up any mold lines. These brake discs, I'll show you what I'm going to do with those. I'm not 100% sure yet. Sorry, there's a bunch of crap that this is going to focus on underneath me, but hopefully that's focusing. I can't tell. These are molded with grooves in them, which are sort of, I don't know, they're meant to represent, like the wear marks on a rotor, but they're completely unrealistic. So I've got a couple strategies. I can either just make a little mandrel. I got a little lathe, so I can mount this in a mandrel and chuck them up in the lathe and just turn them down. Just remove a little bit of surface on them. Alternatively, you know, I don't think they'll end up too thin, but you know, there is a risk there. Alternatively, I could just run some solder on the surface to fill in the grooves and then turn them to try to maintain material thickness. So we'll see. I'll see. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet, and you'll see because I'll bring you along for the ride on that one. So anyways, let me get this sorted out, and then I'll start. I'll shut up and do a bit of a time lapse of me cleaning all these parts. So we'll see you on the other end. I'll probably check in periodically if there's something interesting to talk about. Thanks. All right, I've got a few parts cleaned up. Had some conference calls today, so while that was going on, I just worked on getting some parts cleaned up. Yeah, so just cleaning up mold lines, you know, that sort of thing. Got all the holes drilled out that need drilled out. Test fit the parts interact with each other. Tapped all the holes that are going to get screws in them. So I got a few more over here cleaned up and ready to get primed and painted. I'm working on the calipers. I went ahead and I glued them together. There's 3 pieces in total. There's a front plate, a back plate, in the center section. Which is fairly representative of the way the real calipers are assembled, so they're not too bad. Right now I'm just working on drilling out the holes to put the line that goes between the 2 sides. So I gotta make up a wire to represent that, and then bleed nipples on the top too. So just getting those drilled out. So yeah, I'll just leave the camera rolling and just see how it goes. Get some different glasses on. All right, that's calipers done. Yeah, so I just added some Top Studio bleed nipples, 2 for each calipers, and the top each side. I was gonna put some ferrules on for where the hard line goes on the bottom, but I didn't. They weren't looking that good. And I added the banjo bolt for the brake line. That's going to obviously be run to the rear calipers. Model Factory Hiro doesn't give you the brake lines at all, so that's something you just got to add on your own. So I just added those banjo bolt fittings. I'll run something probably, I don't know, 0.7 or 0.8 mil black line, not braided. These would have been rubber. All right, this little demo on what I'm doing here. Hopefully this all works. I've already turned one of the rotors. I don't know if you can see that. See, I got 2 cameras going here. Where are you? Okay, so there's one that I finished. Just a reminder, this is what it looked like out of the box. I soldered the grooves up, so here's one that's that I soldered over the top of, and now I'm just working on cleaning up that surface. I'm only doing the front side. The back side will never be visible, so no use doing a bunch of effort on those. So I made a little mandrel here to fit the rotor. It's double-sided taped with some very thin, fairly sticky double-sided tape, so I think it's secure enough. I'm just very lightly skim coating this. I find the white metal doesn't turn very well, or not the white metal, the solder, the low temp solder doesn't turn very well, and it tears. So it's not even the best surface finish one I showed you. I did a bit of sanding to it, so I'm just knocking off, more or less. I think the strategy is to knock off the high spots, get it more or less flat, and then sand them. So anyways, let's see. Hopefully the rotor doesn't fly off here. And yeah. So as you can see, it doesn't cut this up the greatest. It could be a function of my bit too. I think I need a more rounded bit cutting tool than I have, but it's working. I'm not losing any material thickness, so that's good. File. Yeah, so obviously this is the first time I've ever done this. You're watching it live. Let's get a different file here. So a little bit of experimenting. Trying to figure out what works best. Looking not bad. Just a couple little pits here. Those out. Yeah, so pretty happy with that. I didn't really like the loading from the side there, but that's okay. No harm. Just trying to clean up the face, or I guess the outer circumference diameter. Yeah. Yeah, so just a nice, much nicer finish. And typically what I do when I do PE rotors or whatever for bikes or things like this, where I've done the same thing on like PE rotors, and I've just never done it on the lathe. I just got this lathe not too long ago. But what I have done with those is I'll, do the same sort of turning and sanding on the mandrel, and then I will paint them, but then I'll come back and sand any paint off of the actual, like where the pads ride, and it gives that very realistic effect. And especially if you got a couple of like sandy grooves, it creates, like, because I'll paint it with a I don't know, like a dark steel color, and then that stays in the grooves once you sand it lightly, and it gives a nice sort of that discolored metal look of a rotor that's been used. So anyways, that's that. All right, there's all the parts for steps 6, 7, and 10, or at least most of 10. All done and ready to go on. Obviously a bit of sub-assemblies. I can put together the front and rear uprights, get the brakes assembled, so forth before I get the chassis back out, but that'll be next. Start putting it together. I'll just give you a little bit of a close-up view of a few things. So the calipers look pretty sweet. Got everything on there. Yeah, what else? I like the rear drive chassis. It turned out quite nice. With the Hardy discs on them. All the reference pictures I've seen of these half shafts. This piece and this piece here. This is all titanium, but it's got some interesting sort of coppery red coating on it, which gives it that color. So I tried to replicate that as best I can to the references I've seen. It's sort of a bit of a rosy copper color. It's kind of interesting. So anyways, I managed to replicate that, I think, fairly well. You know, the uprights, these are on the real car, they're cast magnesium that are then got a chromate conversion on it, gives it that gray color, and then they're also coated in that brown wax as well. So I tried to replicate that a little bit. Not quite as much wax, not as brown as the engine, but and a little bit more wear on these, because they see a lot of weather, which would wipe off the wax coating. Would eventually wear off just because of exposure to the elements. Yeah, and I think I showed you a little bit of work. I did a little bit of lathe work here to make this little spacer right here, because I ground the springs flat on the end so that they sit nice and flat. Where's an end? You can see how the end of the shock, or the spring, sits flat on the seat now. So anyways, by flattening those out, it shortened the spring a little bit. So I made these little aluminum spacers here on my lathe, which closer replicates what this actually is. These are the two adjusters for the ride height. So you have two big nuts and you lock them against each other. So there should be two pieces there anyways, which model Factory Hiro doesn't give you. They just give you the one piece that's turned onto the shock body itself. So it might be a little thicker than it would be in real life, but I don't know, I think that's okay. Also, I think I showed you a little bit of, you know, what I do to polish the white metal. All the upper control arm tubes are polished aluminum on the real car. So I polished those off, masked them off, and then painted everything else. And that goes for, there's a few things. The little one of the 5 links on the rear, same deal, just polished it all. The sway bar end links, did those as well. Here's what the rotors are going to look like. They're all done. I got to give these a wash, actually. I haven't done that yet. I got to do a black wash on it, which will help tone down the shininess of everything. It's obviously not glued on yet. But, you know, I've got, you know, just some added detail on the rotors, which you typically see on rotors. They got identification markings on them, so I did that. A bit of a darker gray steel color in the venting part. it's the backside after I sanded them, so those ridges actually aren't that bad. You could actually probably got away with just sanding them out, but they don't look too bad now. You know, like that's got some I painted them, you remember, and then threw them back in the lathe and turned the faces down with just some sandpaper. So those look good once I get a bit of a wash on them put together, and that'll help sort of tone down the shininess. That's about it though. Yeah, I think I'm gonna start assembling the knuckles and the brakes, get those ready to go on, and so I'll show you a little bit of that, and then we will the next you'll see is I'll be putting all this onto the rear part onto the rear part of the chassis, and then we gotta start working on prepping the tub, and that'll be for the next episode. So I'll have the front suspension ready to go on. Can't put it on yet, but yeah, more to come. All right, we'll be back in a minute. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Yeah, we've got everything done for steps 6 and 7. They're assembled onto the model. I've got all the parts prepped, or most of the parts prepped for step 10, which we'll get to in the next episode. So yeah, you saw a little bit of lathe work, a little bit of soldering, you know, some painting, some assembly work, just fiddling with it, getting everything good to go. Didn't really have any problems during assembly, but that's a function of making sure everything fits before, you know, as you're going. Or as I'm going, I guess. I find that's key, is fit, test fit, test fit, test fit with these things. Didn't really encounter anything that was too out of whack. So that was good. Anyways, let's just, I don't know if you can kind of get a good little close-up. I also went ahead and did the spare tire, got it its carrier installed. That's actually later in the build process, but I want to get this whole assembly done before I marry it to the rest of the chassis. So they also have it, this is actually one area that's kind of odd, the catch tank there. It's a little oil tank, or a catch tank for the oil tank. They have you put that in, I don't know, a couple steps ahead. Like you've got a bunch of other crap on by this point when you're putting that thing in. I had a hard time getting that thing in there. I had to take out this cooler duct to get that to go in there. So that was a bit odd. I'm glad I checked that and did it now. You know, getting the hose in was okay. I just made my own hose out of some Studio 27 or Top Studio, I can't remember, black braided line, which replicates what the real stuff is pretty well. Model Factory Hiro gives you matter of fact, here's some here. They give you some cast white metal hose, which is really nice actually. It's got a nice texture to it. It's well done, but you know, doing it now, it was impossible to get it bent and then get it fitted in there, so that was a no-go. They give you this. I got this is for the front oil cooler, and I'll use it there because I'll have the opportunity to get it fit properly beforehand, before there's everything else in the way. Like if I had thought forward enough, I would have actually probably fit that oil tank and that oil line before I even put the engine in. Then you'd have all the room in the world to work on it. So anyways, lesson learned. So that's all done. Brakes, suspension, they are all looking really really quite good. There's still the upper drag link isn't installed yet because you need the inner fender component in first before you install that. So it's all done, sitting waiting to go, but that's it. Other than that, everything is complete. You can see the underside, the brakes all turned out well. I think you saw I I used a bit of aftermarket here. I put Top Studio bleed nipples on the calipers. I also put a banjo bolt fitting on the caliper and ran brake line. I don't know if you can see the brake line here. It runs. Can you see it there? Right there. So it runs down around, and then I ran it along the tube up to the front. I just used black line the whole way. I would imagine that the real car used some hard lines coming along closer to the back and not soft tubing the whole way, but you'll never see it, quite literally. Once the side pods are on and all the fuel tank and fuel related stuff and oil tanks are in, you'll never be able to see it. So anyways, that's that. Happy with where it goes. So the other thing we got prepped is, you know, all the brakes, front suspension, shocks. I think the coils I'd done previously when I did the rear coils, those get mounted in the interior of the vehicle actually. So the front brakes, they're all done. They're looking pretty sweet. So the uprights. So yeah, there we have it. So next episode 4, we're going to be working on step 8, 9, 10, and 11. And that will get most of the front part. Most everything inside here. So stay tuned for more. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. I'll throw that there. I appreciate you sticking around and watching. If you like what you saw, come back for more in the next episode. In the meantime, take care, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.